Hey, what is going on YouTube? In today's video, we are going to cover a Python script. This script I developed because I was given a file, and in that file it has a range of IP addresses, and I needed each individual IP address broken down in a separate file. And instead of going manually one by one and typing each of the ranges, because some of them were up to 50 or more, I had developed this Python script to break down each range or each subnet and then create a separate list for me to use elsewhere. So if you do enjoy this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you want more content similar to this video, be sure to subscribe. Let's get started. Just to give an example or more context into why I created this script, here is a example of the data that I had received. In there was several IP addresses. It was a lot more than 10 lines, and in each of those lines was a range of IP addresses. Some of those had one IP address, for example, 192.168.1.1. And then as you can see on line 3, another example is 192.168.2.3 and had a range from 192.168.2.40. So we wanted every IP address in between 3 and 40 with that same subnet range in a separate file, and we wanted each of those for each of these lines. So the script that I had created was something similar to what you see here. So starting from the top and going down, you can see that we imported 3 Python libraries, all default with the Python installation, and that's going to be CSV, sys, and IP address. Right below that, we have an empty list that we created with a new IP list variable name. In this video, we're going to do something a little different. Instead of going from top down, we're going to kind of go in order as to how the script gets executed to make more sense for those that don't understand the process of where I'm trying to go with. Starting down here at the bottom, we call the main function. In there, we define a variable called old IP list. In there, we're calling the get IP from CSV, which is right here on line 38. This will use the CSV file that we just covered a minute ago with the different examples that I provided. So we are going to use with open, and we're going to open this CSV. We're going to use mode R for read, and then we're going to assign that to the variable file. From there, we're going to import CSV reader, or we're going to create a variable CSV reader, and we're going to assign it to the csv.reader function, and we're going to pass through file. Again, we are going to create another list and call that IP list, and then we are going to iterate through each line in the CSV reader, which is the file that we are passing through. For every line that it finds, it'll assign that IP list plus line to the IP list list. So essentially every line that it finds, it'll save that one and the next one, and it will not overwrite, and it'll assign it to IP list. Finally, once this loop is done, it will return IP list. So if we go down here, the next thing that it will do is the final IP list. With this one, we'll call the create new IP list, and in there we will pass the old IP list, which is what we just covered. So on line 45, as you can see here, we have the create new IP list, the argument old IP list, and in there we are again going to loop through each of those values. So for IP and old IP list, we're going to see if there's a dash for the range or a slash for the subnet, and if there's not either of those, then automatically add that IP address. That means that there is a single IP address, and we can assign that to that new IP list that we had defined at the very beginning. So as it's looping through each of those, as I said, it'll look for the dash or the slash or nothing. So if it does find a dash, if there's an IP range, for instance, 192.168.1.1 through 192.168.1.40, it's going to go into this right here, and it's going to use get IP from range function, and it's going to pass through that IP or that range of IPs, which is this function here on line 9. Here's the argument that we are passing through. Here's kind of a simple explanation of it, but it's kind of everything I'm already talking about. We are going to assign the IP split variable, and then we are going to split the IP with a dash. So now we have both the initial value and then the value after the dash broken up into a list. On the next one, we're going to use start IP to get the very first IP, and we're going to assign that to the first location within the IP split list of 0, which is 0. we're going to get the second IP by assigning that to end IP, and we are going to get the first IP location in IP split. So now we have two IP addresses. We have the very first one and the second one, and they were both broken up into two different variables now. We also want to get the prefix of that variable, so 192.168.1, and we are going to do that by splitting it once again. So this is where the comma comes in. So we're going to assign it to the variable p. We're going to split it by the period, and then now we have 192 in a list, 168 in that list, and 1 in that list, and the last value 1 in that list, or whatever number is in there. So we know we automatically want to delete the last value because we want to get the prefix. So now we get, if we do delete and then p and then the location 3, that will delete the very last integer in this value, which is 1, and that'll give us 192.168.1. And then as you could see here, since this is a list, the variable p is a list, we want to go ahead and join that again and make it a string value. So to do so, we are going to say IP prefix equals period, and then we want to join that to p, and then we want to add a period at the end. And then from there, we want to get a list of the numbers in the range. So to do that, we're going to use s as the starting variable, and we're going to split the starting IP again. And we're going to, again, split it into a list, and we want to get that third value, which is going to be 1 in this case. And then for E, for the end IP, we're again going to grab that third or fourth integer. Remember, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. Now that we have both the starting range and the ending range, so if this was 1 and this is 40, we want to use for I in range of int s, because remember this is a string value, so we're gonna assign it to an integer. So this will be 1, and then we want to get the range between 1 and e, and then we want to get +1 because we want to get that final value as well to capture that. And then for each of those, we are going to append the IP prefix plus I as a string value. So if the example was 192.168.1.1 through the range of 192.168.1.40, in this, it'll look at 1, it'll look at 40, because this +1 will get us to 40, otherwise it'll just do 1 through 39. It'll take that prefix, and for each of those, so 192.168.1.2.3, and so on and so forth, those will all get appended right here or added to the IP prefix, and then that will be appended to the new IP list. So that closes out the IP range. Pretty much the same thing if we were to go to the next function or the next if statement in there for the subnet range. If we scroll up to the top and we get IP from subnet, the function that we had created on line 25, pass through the IP. We're going to assign two empty variables, first IP and last IP. In there, we are going to use the IP address library that we had added at the very beginning. In there, we're going to pass the IP. And here we got the first IP. We're going to assign it to a string variable. We're going to call it, again, we're going to call it network.network address function. And we're going to add 1. And then we're going to -1 for the broadcast address. And then in there, we're going to append the first IP and the last IP. And then if there's any errors, it will be captured here and it will print it. And that's pretty much going to be this script. And then at the very end, we will return the new IP list. And down here is where we will write to text. So this will save the file, and we are going to save it to the C drive temp, this directory here, final list.csv. And we are going to pass through that final IP list, and which is going to be this function up here. So here's the file path, which is the first argument we're passing through, and then the final IP list, which is the second one. We're going to open up the file path. We're going to use the mode write using the file variable. In there, we're going to iterate through each of the lines inside of final IP list. And then for each of those items, we are going to write the item. And at the end of that item, we want to make sure we add a comma because it is going to be a CSV. And then we want to separate it by a new line. Don't really have to do that, I suppose, if it is a CSV, because everything's going to be separated by a comma. But this works out perfect. So let's go ahead and execute this script. To execute this script in Visual Studio Code, go to the top, hit run, run without debugging. Now if we bring up the file that we had just created and we look at the other one for reference, we could see here the first IP address is 192.168.1. Automatically assigns it. Same with the next one, .54. On line 3, we have a range from .3 to .40. So we should see .3 and all the way down. So 192.168.2.10, 11, 12, all the way down to .40, which we do. Next one, we see a subnet of -30. And then we got right here 10.10.1.1. And then the broadcast 10.10.1.2. Or vice versa. Same thing for the subnet 31. And then we get 10.20.1. That's down here, 10.0.20.1, 34, and then we get another range of 10.2.33.1, and then that's a range to 52. And sorry, I missed the other range that was here, 192.168.22.30 all the way down to 101. Here's 30, and here's 101. So the good thing about this script is that we didn't have to manually go through each one. So what I started doing before I got any further, I would go into each of these values and I was separating it. So if I had 192.168.2.3, I'd come in here. This is edit or a view only version of this right now. But essentially I would go down each line and I was manually typing in each of the IP addresses within that specified range, which was taking too long. And I always script everything, because I do think it saves a lot of time, and it also is something that I'm always willing to learn. So that is what I did. So with that being said, I urge you, if you are in a position to do so, script it, automate it in some way or another. Not only will it save you some time, but it will be able to be used elsewhere in a different situation or environment where you may need to get to a result faster, or maybe even you want to showcase it on an interview. Whatever the case may be, it is always good to try and use a script. I do it. Sometimes it is a waste of time, but I always take it as a lesson. And then this one I found very useful, as I could use this going forward, because system administrators may send me a list, and in that list I may need it broken down by IP address instead of a range. So this is what I could use going forward. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video and you want similar content to this video, subscribe for more, drop a like to show support, and as always, never stop learning.